What if one of the most iconic cartoons of the 80s was built on rushed experiments, near-canceled plans, and behind-the-scenes chaos no fan ever saw coming? Thundercats may look like a simple action show today, but its creation was anything but simple. Hidden inside its roar are stories of toy disasters, censored episodes, and creative battles that nearly derailed the series. And by the end of this list, you'll look at Third Earth very differently. Fact 15. The show was created to sell toys that didn't exist yet. Thundercats didn't start as a grand storytelling dream, it started as a business move. Rankin Bass wanted to compete with He-Man and G.I. Joe, but there was one giant problem. The toy line wasn't ready. According to internal production notes, toy companies initially rejected Thundercats because the designs were considered too expensive to manufacture the armor, the weapons, the detailed character lines. It wasn't until the show aired and became popular that LJN finally agreed to produce figures. That resulted in something unheard of. Thundercats aired with no toys on shelves, while kids begged stores for figures that didn't exist yet. The demand became so intense that the first wave sold out instantly, fueling the show's early mythology. Ironically, this delay also gave writers huge creative freedom in Season 1, since no toy company was dictating which characters must appear. This freedom helped make Season 1 the strongest in the entire series. Fact 14. Early character designs looked nothing like the final versions. If you saw the earliest concept art, you might not recognize a single Thundercat. Liono originally appeared as a bulky brute, more barbarian than noble hero. Cheetara's early outfit was so revealing that censors immediately shut it down. Tigra was drawn bright purple with neon stripes, and Panthro started out small and thin rather than the powerhouse we know. Even Snarf was dramatically different, originally envisioned as a huge feline mount, almost like Battlecat from He-Man. The team downsized him into a comedic companion, so younger viewers had someone relatable. Even the Sword of Omens took time to evolve. Early drafts portrayed it as a massive broadsword, until the animators realized that drawing such a large weapon repeatedly would ruin production schedules. Narrowing these designs into something animatable shaped the final look of the series. Fact 13. Liono's voice actor was already famous for a serial icon. Larry Kenney, the unforgettable voice behind Liono, had already earned fame as Count Chocula. It's hard to imagine that the same man responsible for the friendly, chocolate-loving vampire also delivered Liono's powerful speeches. His radio background gave him enormous vocal range, allowing him to voice multiple Thundercats and even villains when needed. One of his biggest challenges was adjusting his voice as Liono aged from a child to an adult early in the series. Kenney subtly lowered the tone episode by episode, making Liono's maturity arc feel natural without viewers noticing. Recording sessions were often chaotic, with actors shouting, laughing, improvising, and sometimes losing their voices. Kenney, however, became known as the steady anchor who could hold character no matter how loud the booth became. Fact 12. Mumm-Ra was inspired by classic 1930s monster movies. Mumm-Ra channeled the spirit of the original Universal monsters. The creators modeled him partly after the 1932 film The Mummy, aiming for a villain both supernatural and psychologically haunting, not just another bad guy of the week. His iconic transformation scene originally included much scarier, almost zombie-like visuals, but censors demanded they be toned down. Even his major weakness mirrors was inspired by vampire myths, emphasizing how much he hated seeing the truth of his own cursed existence. Voice actor Earl Hammond delivered two distinct performances, the frail, raspy ancient form and the booming, ever-living version. His range made Mumm-Ra feel like two different beings locked in one body. Fact 11. Thundercats was originally meant to end after 65 episodes. The first 65 episodes of Thundercats, what fans consider Season 1, were produced under the standard syndication model of the 80s. Cartoons aimed for 65 episodes because it provided exactly 13 weeks of daily broadcasts, enough for consistent reruns. Creators believed the series was finished once production wrapped. Cast contracts ended. Studios moved on. Writers delivered a finale that offered emotional closure, never expecting the story would continue. But something unexpected happened. Reruns became wildly popular, and suddenly the delayed toy line exploded. Demand skyrocketed, fan mail surged, and networks realized they had a hit worth extending. Bringing Thundercats back wasn't easy. Many original animators had moved to other projects, forcing the studio to rebuild teams. Because of these changes, animation quality varied more in later seasons. Characters drifted slightly off-model, action scenes became less fluid, and scripts were often isolated instead of tightly coordinated. New characters, like the Thunder Kittens and additional heroes, appeared largely because the toy company needed new products to sell. That shifted the show from its early, story-driven tone into a more commercial model. Still, the revived episodes kept the world alive longer than the creators ever expected. Fact 10. Several episodes were censored, edited, or removed from rotation. Thundercats pushed boundaries for an 80s children's cartoon, resulting in numerous censorship issues. One of the most controversial episodes, The Garden of Delights, featured psychological illusions that some broadcasters considered too frightening. Another storyline explored Liono's growing dependence on the Sword of Omens, which critics viewed as a metaphor for addiction. That episode was pulled from several markets. Violence also caused problems. Even though characters never bled, the sword fighting and hand-to-hand combat was more intense than typical cartoons of the era. UK broadcasts trimmed scenes involving weapon strikes, falls, or physical harm. Some episodes involving slavery metaphors or darker themes about the destruction of Thundera were edited to reduce emotional impact. The series' willingness to introduce real-world parallels, loss, manipulation, control, made broadcasters nervous. As a result, different countries aired different versions of the show, and in some places, entire episodes disappeared from daytime rotation. Thundercats remains one of the few 80s cartoons with such a complex and varied censorship history. Fact 9. The theme song was composed in a single day. The iconic Thundercats theme wasn't the result of months of work. Composer Bernard Hoffer created it in a single day after receiving minimal notes. Keep it short, make it exciting, and ensure kids remember it instantly. Working with a tight budget, Hoffer used synthesizers for most of the instrumentation, reserving live drums to give the opening its powerful punch. The Thunder, Thunder, Thundercats chant became one of the most memorable elements of the show. Surprisingly, it wasn't performed by professional singers, but by the actual voice cast. They gathered around a microphone, shouting the name repeatedly while engineers layered their voices to create that booming effect fans know so well. Despite the rushed process and limited budget, the theme song became permanently etched into pop culture. Many fans who haven't watched the series in decades can still hum the melody with perfect accuracy. Its success came from its simplicity, energy, and distinctive sound. A reminder that sometimes lightning strikes in a single creative burst. Fact 8. Serious sci-fi writers helped build the world of Thundercats. Thundercats wasn't written by random freelancers. Its early episodes were shaped by respected comic strip artist Leonard Starr and veteran writer Peter Lawrence. Star gave the show an unusually strong narrative foundation for a toy-driven cartoon, plotting character arcs, conflicts, and emotional beats with a focus on storytelling rather than merchandise. Writers built an entire mythology behind the scenes. They created detailed histories for the fallen planet of Thundera, mapped out the cultures of Third Earth, and established rules that governed the show's mix of magic and technology. Much of this world-building never made it to screen directly, but it informed character behavior and story decisions, giving the show a cohesive and believable universe. Episodes explored themes far beyond typical children's programming: responsibility, prejudice, leadership, and survival. Even when toy mandates later shaped storylines, the writers continued threading deeper emotional and moral elements into episodes. For many fans, this richer storytelling is why Thundercats still resonates decades later. Fact 7. The series originally included much more intense violence. Before censors stepped in, early Thundercats scripts featured far more intense action. Storyboards included scenes of visible injuries, fallen characters, and occasionally even death. Animators planned more realistic sword impacts and dramatic combat moments. But when network reviewers examined the drafts, nearly every violent scene was flagged. To meet broadcast standards, creators reimagined much of the combat. The Sword of Omens became primarily a tool of vision rather than a weapon. Energy blasts and magical attacks were redesigned to avoid showing direct physical harm. Even the villains were softened. Mutants who originally acted brutally were rewritten as more comedic adversaries. Mumm-Ra's darker magic sequences were significantly toned down. Early versions portrayed transformations with unsettling detail, but all gruesome elements were removed before animation began. Despite these cuts, Thundercats still retained a more intense tone than many 80s cartoons, proving that strong storytelling didn't require graphic scenes. Fact 6. Cheetara quietly redefined female heroes in animation. In an era when most female cartoon characters were either sidekicks or background roles, Cheetara broke the mold. She wasn't a damsel or a love interest. She was a frontline warrior who outran, outfought, and often outstrategized her male teammates. Her speed made her one of the most powerful Thundercats, and her staff skills gave her combat sequences that stood out as some of the best animated action in the series. Creators were determined not to sexualize her design. They balanced athleticism with practicality, choosing a costume that was iconic, but not exaggerated. Cheetara also received genuine character development through episodes that explored her instincts, loyalty, and physical limits. Voice actress Lynn Lipton gave her a confident, emotionally grounded tone, helping young viewers, especially girls, connect with her strength. She became one of the earliest mainstream cartoon heroines portrayed as an equal rather than an accessory, influencing animated female characters for years to come. Fact 5. The budget shrunk dramatically. Every season. Thundercats' first season had a surprisingly strong budget for an 80s action cartoon. Animators produced fluid movement, rich backgrounds, and dynamic action scenes. But after reruns proved profitable, executives began cutting costs. Later seasons looked noticeably different as the budget decreased. Lower funding meant less animation time and fewer redraws when characters drifted off model. Backgrounds became simpler, dialogue scenes grew longer, and many action sequences relied on previously used animation. Viewers began noticing repeated shots, characters running, launching attacks, and transforming, taken directly from earlier episodes. Music also suffered. Instead of fresh compositions, later episodes reused scores from previous seasons. Voice actors had less recording time, meaning fewer takes and less nuance. Writers adapted by creating plots that required less visual spectacle. Despite these limitations, the team pushed hard to maintain emotional tone and character relationships. These cost-cut decisions shaped how Thundercats evolved, reflecting the financial pressures behind many iconic 80s shows. Fact 4. The Thunder Tank had to be simplified to avoid production disaster. The Thunder Tank, one of the show's most recognizable vehicles, originally had a far more complex design. Early sketches included retractable armor plates, transforming claws, and multiple moving components. Animators quickly realized this level of mechanical detail would be nearly impossible to animate repeatedly on a weekly schedule. To prevent massive delays and cost overruns, the Thunder Tank was redesigned into a more streamlined version. While it remained visually impressive, many intricate moving parts were removed. This compromised design still looked powerful, but could be drawn consistently by overseas animation teams working under tight deadlines. Even with the simplified model, animators reused Thunder Tank sequences across the series to save time. However, the vehicle's final design achieved exactly what creators needed: something iconic, memorable, and animatable. Had the original version been approved, production would have slowed to a crawl and potentially jeopardized entire episodes. Fact 3. Liono's aging twist created built-in character conflict. One of the most unique elements of Thundercats is Liono's transformation from child to adult. When the Thundercats escape the destruction of Mumm-Ra, Liono's suspended animation chamber malfunctions, causing his body to mature while his mind remains youthful. This storyline created internal conflict rarely seen in 80s cartoons, a physically powerful leader still learning emotional maturity. Writers used this twist to explore responsibility, trust, and leadership. Liono often faced challenges not just from external threats, but from his own inexperience. This made him more relatable than the typical flawless cartoon hero. Larry Kenney's voice work was crucial. Instead of abruptly switching to an adult tone, he gradually aged Liono's voice across early episodes. The subtle change helped audiences feel the character's growth without needing direct exposition. This unusual age dynamic allowed for more emotional storytelling than most toy-driven cartoons of the era, turning Liono into a genuinely layered protagonist. Fact 2. Voice actors played dozens of characters to reduce costs. Because the studio needed to save money, Thundercats relied on a small voice cast to handle a huge roster of characters. Larry Kenney voiced Liono, but he also performed Jackalman and numerous background characters. Earl Hammond voiced Mumm-Ra and several supporting villains, shifting effortlessly between ancient whispers and thunderous commands. Lynn Lipton, the voice of Cheetara, voiced almost every female character in the early seasons. Not because it was planned, but because the budget allowed for few additional actors. This multi-role strategy created a hidden layer of charm. The same vocal performers shaped the show's emotional tone and personality across episodes. Their versatility allowed scenes to feel lively even with limited resources. Recording sessions often involved actors rapidly switching voices mid-scene, sometimes without stopping the tape. This unusual process helped the cast develop chemistry and timing that elevated the entire series. Despite the constraints, Thundercats achieved memorable vocal performances that remain beloved today. Fact 1. A fully written series finale was never produced. Thundercats ended abruptly in 1989 after 130 episodes. The cancellation surprised writers, who had already drafted an elaborate series finale meant to tie up every ongoing storyline. The planned ending would have shown Liono fully stepping into his role as Lord of the Thundercats, completing his emotional journey from inexperienced youth to wise leader. Former enemies were supposed to find peace, and the Thundercats were set to establish a permanent home on Third Earth. But production halted before storyboards could be finalized. Voice actors never recorded lines, and animators never received the episode. When the show went off the air, the last broadcast wasn't meant as a finale. It simply became one by circumstance. Years later, writers shared details of the lost ending, giving fans a bittersweet glimpse of what might have been. The absence of a true finale left Thundercats with an unfinished legacy, allowing fans to imagine their own final adventure. Thundercats wasn't just another 80s cartoon, it was a whirlwind of creativity, chaos, and accidental genius. From abandoned finales to censored episodes and last-minute reinventions, its legacy is far wilder than fans ever realized. If you loved exploring these hidden stories, hit like, drop a comment with your favorite Thundercat, and subscribe for more deep dives into the shows that shaped our childhoods. There are plenty more secrets waiting to be uncovered.